Okay, welcome to Infinite Roleplay. I'm Nelson. This right here is my man Bruce, and this is going to be the segment of Gaming in the Raw, where we discuss using the rules as written to crush all opposition. So, Bruce, you were talking about creating a fighter barbarian build.
Yeah, like I said, the idea behind it was essentially to try and make as tanky of a fighter, a melee damage dealer as possible, and you could do that a few different ways. You know, you can have an absurdly high armor class and just be impossible to hit, but I don't feel that you're necessarily tanky per se in the way. You're just not getting hit. I'm talking about taking hits and just slugging them off, right?
What you're talking about is a damage sponge.
Absolutely, a meat shield in the sense, every sense of the word. Not just putting someone in the way who can't be hit. Someone who can just take everything you got and keep coming. So the idea is to start off as a fighter, so you can get that heavy armor proficiency. You just be proficient in every piece of martial equipment in the book, basically. And then you go that, so you can get that full plate, rocking 18 AC, and then you can +3 it. Grab a shield if you want. Be sitting on about a 24 AC, which is pretty respectable. But what you really want that full plate for is the heavy armor master feat, which all damage you take from non-magical sources is reduced by 3. You're like, 3, that don't seem like much. Well, it's all about the math here. That's going to add up over time. But then we dip into Barbarian. Yeah, we go 3 levels into Barbarian to get the Totemic Warrior path. And you take the Bear Warrior, which says, when you're raging, all damage you take, except for psychic damage, you have resistance to. So that means all damage except for psychic damage is cut in half. And then after you cut that in half, the Heavy Armor Master is going to kick in and further reduce damage potentially by another 3. So that's going to add up pretty quick as far as just soaking up blows. And on top of that, while you're raging, you're doing extra damage. You got bonus on strength checks, and you're just looking like a badass out there in that heavy armor, just mad as fuck, just soaking everything up with your strong jawline. There are other ways I'm sure you could do it, but that's just one of them I considered in a melee option. I'm sure there's plenty of spells and other nonsense. You could have, say your friendly neighborhood cleric throw on you to make it even better.
Yeah, there's also another question which I haven't been able to figure out in the rulebook, which I would think it would depend on the DM's ruling, which is when you're combining damage resistance and heavy armor master, which one is applicable first? Because it does make a big difference.
It absolutely does. And one thing to take into consideration with 5e is while you have rules as written, a lot of it is rules as interpreted. So for various rulings, there's no hard line, aspect on them. It's not this is how it is. A lot of it is absolutely up to the DM. And
well, that's more true with different games like 13th Age, which actually in the book, the rules as written says to interpret it according to gameplay. And in 5e, it's more of a you can read it directly, rules as written. And there's
you
actually
can.
not within the rules. There's not much room for interpretation. That's usually done for role-playing purposes,
Right?
And to add that level of creativity and immersion in that environment.
Right. Well, when I say interpretation is when you come into situations like this, for example, and there's various other ones in the rule book which, I mean, you could talk about, you know, in another show if you wanted, where the rules aren't completely clear on how something works, exactly, you know, when the triggered effect happens and things of the sort. And this would be one of those situations. I would think that the damage resistance would apply first before the soak, because, you know, you're already naturally resistant or whatever to the damage. And then, you know, the soak's going to apply after you just basically ignore whatever.
With
But I
that,
mean,
well, playing the devil's advocate with a different interpretation is that the heavy armor master feat states, while wearing heavy armor, bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage that you take from non-magical weapons is reduced by 3. This is dependent on a piece of armor you're wearing,
right,
when your damage resistance is actually your physicality, your
right,
actual body. So you could always interpret it that the heavy armor master would trigger first because the weapon would hit the armor before it strikes through the armor, hitting you.
right. And you absolutely could, you know. And if you were to do it that way, you would have a bit more diminishing returns in your soak.
Well, how so?
Well, it's math. Cut the damage in half, then reduce, or reduce, then cut in half. If you
Well,
cut it in half and then reduce, long term, you're going to be soaking more damage.
well, say if you get hit by 15 points of damage,
All right.
right? And you resist. Well, let's put a round number: 14 points of damage. You resist half of that, and you would take 7.
Right. Then you'd soak 3.
And you would soak 3, effectively only taking 4 points of damage.
4. Correct.
Now, if you do it the other way, and you take 14 points of damage, and you reduce 3, you get hit by
11.
an odd number, 11.
So we round up or round down?
If you round up, you would effectively take 6
5.
points of damage.
Or 6. So you're
Yeah, if you're rounding up, you would take 6 points. If you round down, you would take 5. Now, it's less effective, but
again, it's minimal. It's like minimalistic immediately, but long-term gameplay effects, you know, if you do the math long-term, if you really want to get into some number crunching, is you're going to take more damage overall in your lifetime of being a sponge. You know.
Have you thought of, instead of going the barbarian fighter route, instead doing barbarian druid, still being a totemic path, but taking the path of the moon druid as far as the druids go? As soon as you hit the ability to take a wild shape, you could wild shape into something like a dire wolf or a bear. You get 30 plus hit points. Your AC is not that high initially, but you have those extra hit points which are removed from the wild shape before you yourself have to worry about your own independent hit point pool.
Right.
And, you know, going something like wolf is they get pack tactics, so while you're adjacent to an ally and you're attacking an enemy, you attack with advantage. If you go something like a brown bear, they have multi-attack, giving you 2 attacks before you have access to actually having 2 attacks with a weapon.
Right.
And the natural weapons of your animal forms count as weapon attacks, so you can also add your barbarian rage damage boost to that as well. Not to mention you have, when not in your forms, you can cast healing spells for the party. You have cantrips that you can use, like, say, Thorn Whip to pull an enemy closer to you, so you can close distance a little bit faster. You get to wild shape as a bonus action. And also, while in your wild shape, you can use, because of the Moon Druid Path feature, you can use your spells to heal you, regardless. Your spell slots to heal your animal form.
See, something like that, I think doing it that route, while without the heavy armor master, like we just discussed, you won't be able to soak as much damage. Yes, you get the added hit points as a buffer, you know, but I think that would come down to more of a versatility aspect. Like how does the player feel? Like definitely as the druid, you'll have the extra spells and animal shapes you can take as the situation requires it. And that's going to give you a lot more versatility in the party for sure. So I mean, I think that basically just comes down to
Yeah.
to player choice. Whereas if you went, one thing you could look forward to, however, if you took the fighter barbarian path, the fighter gets more feats than any other class in the game. They also get the almighty action surge, basically giving them an extra turn almost. And that builds up over time too. Eventually, like two of those. So I mean, you could effectively make some crazy like 6 attacks in one round or something like that,
Most definitely.
while having I think a fighter gets something like three more feats than any other class in the game because of the ability score improvement thing. They're also very versatile because when we were discussing your level 3 archetype, the fighter can also, when you do that, if you go that route, you can go Battle Master to get maneuvers. You could go Eldritch Knight to get some spells as well to complement your arsenal, or you could go Champion, improved critical and a few other things. But I mean, you get a lot of options from the fighter as well in terms of just feats, and all those maneuvers you can get are extremely versatile. If you wanted to do that, and the extra spells from Eldritch Knight, on top of that as well, if you wanted to take that path. So it definitely has its own merits. But
Hmm.
one of the definitive key factors in my mind for making something able to just soak tons of damage, you got to include Barbarian, man. You got to include Barbarian Totemic Bear Path for just ultimate damage mitigation. So,
Well,
I mean,
there's
you could even go Barbarian Wizard. I mean, as absurd as that might seem, just to get access to all the wizard spells, to buff yourself.
Well, in that case, if you were interested in spellcasting classes with a barbarian, I think sorcerer, going the draconic sorcerer or warlock route would be better because warlock, one of the invocations you can get is Armor of Shadows, which effectively gives you mage armor at will, and when using the spell, it does not count as armor, so it is an additional buffer to your armor class with your unarmored AC.
Now,
As the sorcerer, if you go draconic path, you get that on at all times. The base AC 13 plus your dex plus your constitution.
see, barbarians currently can get the highest armor class in the game. Actually, with the Dex mod, Constitution mod, and I should have it pulled up right now for immediate reference to further argue my cause. But yeah, they can get some crazy like 25 AC or something, and that's without full plate. That's just a naked barbarian. You know
All
what I
right.
mean? The
Well,
thing is, though.
at second level, say if you were to go sorcerer barbarian and take the dragon sorcerer bloodline,
Mhm.
you start off at a base AC of 13. Now, depending on your stats, say for some odd reason at level 2, somehow you manage to max your stats out at 20, it would be 13 plus 5 for dex, which is already 18, plus the 5 for constitution, which would
Mhm.
bring it up to 23. You give him a shield, you have a 25 AC at a potentially
Yep.
level 2.
Yeah, there it is.
But it's not just that with the barbarian. You can do that. You can do that trick with a monk as well, because they have unarmored AC, except they use the stat of wisdom instead of constitution.
See, now the problem though with multi-classing a barbarian into spellcasters though is they can't cast spells while raging.
No, they can't cast spells while raging. So, but if you go, what is it?
I mean,
The
if you
warlock, the
if you
warlock way.
uh huh.
You're not having many spells to begin with. So you can always open up with some spells, maybe pepper a target, go into a rage, and take Pact of the weapon, Pact of the blade, and you literally don't need to walk around with any armor or any weaponry. You can create your weaponry and basically create your armor,
Right.
because you can cast Armor of Shadows, and that's just on for that battle. It's on for a minute without having to
Yeah,
concentrate on
you
anything.
you definitely have to cast your spells ahead of time prior to the battle. If you wanted to do the barbarian, enrage to get all that sweet damage resistance. Something else though that just occurred to me is actually using the bard uh, could be pretty useful for like a tank build because you got the bardic inspiration dice. However, if you go down when you get to pick your college and do the lore college, and you can use the cutting words. And it says when a creature you can see within 60 feet of you makes an attack roll, an ability check, or a damage roll, you can use your reaction to expend one use of your bardic inspiration, rolling a bardic inspiration die and subtracting the number rolled from that creature's roll. So you could use that to further mitigate damage as well, on top of your resistance or possible soak with heavy armor master.
Well, instead of that, I mean that's a good route, but it's also very limited, and the fact that you can only do that for as many bardic inspirations as you can use that day.
Well, you also you get the font of inspiration depending on how far you dip into bard, and you regain all of your expended uses of bardic inspiration when you finish a short or long rest. So
Ah.
you can just pop down for an hour, and you have bardic an amount equal to, I believe, your charisma modifier, minimum 1.
Minimum one, but then you get
So,
into a sort of balancing your stats, having
well,
to max out your con, your dex, and your charisma
well,
is pretty hectic.
you don't have to max your con necessarily. The only real benefit that you're going to get from a high con is you get to add the modifier to your HP per level, which
and and
which
your armor class.
as a barbarian, yes.
Yes, as a barbarian.
If that's the case though, you don't have to make a strength bar. You could make a dex bar. You could go full dex, full con, and charisma, 15 each, all your other stats at 8 if you go the point buy route. So you can get the max bardic inspiration, you'll get the max possible AC from your dex and constitution, and you can just use a dex based weapon as a
Well,
bar. The
instead
only
of
thing that
instead
you
of
won't
going that
get,
route,
you just won't get the added strength damage when you rage, but the primary purpose of that is for the damage mitigation anyways.
but that's if you're gonna go barbarian, why not focus on dexterity and constitution as far as tanking ability?
Well, what I'm saying is, you mentioned that you wouldn't be able to do strength, constitution, and dex
It'll
because
get pretty hectic.
you need charisma for a bard. You don't have to do strength. With the point buy system, you can go 15, 15, 15, 8, 8, and 8.
Hmm.
So you can get the max defense as a bard by dropping 2 of the 15s in dex and constitution, because you can use dex-based weapons, finesse weapons, and then if you wanted to go bard to get more versatility, or the cutting words to use your bardic inspiration to further reduce damage, and drop the other 15 in charisma, so you get the maximum amount of
Well,
bardic inspiration
the
dice.
one thing I do enjoy about that build of combining both barbarian and bard is the cantrip vicious mockery.
Yeah,
Can you
give
imagine
them
a barbarian just
disadvantage.
screaming at you and his like war chants and stuff?
But again, the thing about that though too is you got to open with your spells prior
Yeah,
to raging, and
prior to raging.
I don't believe using an inspiration die is actually a spell. So you can just
No,
do that
it's
while
not.
you rage.
But does using an inspiration die, but using your bardic inspiration, does that count as some sort of spell or some sort of concentration type ability?
I don't believe so. Let me look right now, double check.
She says you
It's,
can
it's
inspire
not saying
others
it's not
through
saying
your
anything
virtues.
about it being a spell. It requires a bonus action on your turn. And then when you get the cutting words, that's going to
Who
let
can
you.
who can hear you? So you wouldn't need to be actually using your bardic music.
I mean, you could, yeah, and it doesn't have to be like playing a
So
lute or whatever. You could be thumping your chest rhythmically, having a war chant like you said, however you want to describe it. So you could definitely rage from the way I understand it, and then use your cutting words to mitigate more damage that way.
okay, so what do you think about this? Still using the barbarian,
Hmm.
dex, constitution, and charisma, but
Hmm.
instead of a barbarian bard, going barbarian warlock with Pact of the Fiend.
I'm not overly familiar with what Pact of the Fiend does.
Well, Pact of the Fiend, um, at first level, you get something called a class feature called Dark One's Blessing. What that
Hmm.
basically does is that when you drop an enemy to 0 points, you gain temporary hit points equal to your charisma modifier plus your warlock level. And that's on
Okay.
permanently. It does not use any of your reactions. Doing that and taking I forget what the feat is called. I think it's defensive duelist.
Okay.
Yes, defensive duelist. Okay, as a reaction when somebody's attacking you and using a finessable weapon as a reaction, you can add your proficiency modifier to your armor class.
Okay.
And your proficiency modifier is, of course, character based and not class based. So regardless of how much of whatever levels you choose to go, you can keep that as a constant.
Right.
So
Yeah.
say at level 5, let's say
Hmm.
you only are second level barbarian and
Okay.
a third level warlock, and you're human.
Right.
Let's just say you can take defensive duelist as your human feat.
Uh-huh.
Every time you kill something, and you're going 15, 15, 15, so you have a +2 modifier on your charisma. Every
Hmm.
time you drop an enemy, you're gaining 5 points of temporary hit points.
Okay.
So whenever you get hit, those 5 come right off the top, and
Right.
then you get to add your barbarian resistances afterwards.
Well, the problem with only with stopping at level 2 for the barbarian is you don't get access to the totemic warrior path. However, when they rage, their base rage,
Yeah.
they still get resistance to slashing, piercing, and bludgeoning. But the thing that makes the level 3 getting that bear so great is then you get resistance to thunder, lightning, fire, acid, poison, anything that is not psychic. All damage that doesn't immediately fuck with your thinking bone, you have immunity or resistance to.
But that's still viable later on in the build.
Yeah, I mean, if you were going level 5, I mean, and you wanted to go that way, it would absolutely still work. Like I
Because
said,
you,
playing a
you can still
barbarian,
go
and
reversed. You can still go reversed and take
I
a third by fifth level being a third level barbarian, second level warlock. Still get Dark One's blessing. You'll get 4 temporary hit points every time you drop something. You'll get the invocations. And invocations they're insane for the
right.
warlock. You can get the invocation Armor of Shadows, increase your armor class even higher,
Uh-huh.
and say if you're a human, you could take Armor of Shadows and like Devil Sight
Right.
and get 120-foot dark vision, whether normal or magical darkness, so you can see through a darkness spell.
Right.
You can get the Armor of Shadows, eventually get one with the shadows, and go invisible at will in dim or darker lighting.
Hmm.
You
Now
know,
here's
so
here's here's something else you could do. As far as another way to cut down some damage is, again, we'll start with Barbarian, but we'll dip into Monk, and the reason for that is the monks get a thing called deflect missiles, where starting at 3rd level you can use your reaction to deflect or catch the missiles when you are hit by a ranged weapon attack. When you do so, the damage you take from the attack is reduced by 1d10 plus your dexterity modifier plus your monk level. And if you reduce the damage to 0, you can catch the missile if it is small enough for you to hold in one hand and have at least one hand free. And you can spend 1 key point if you catch the projectile to make a ranged attack with a weapon or piece of ammunition you just caught as part of the same reaction. So, if you're looking for a way to just slug off range damage,
But
if
that
you're
still
concerned
leaves
about
you
that,
equally, um, equally sort of vulnerable to melee damage, which I
well,
would think the barbarian is getting up in the mix.
yes, but you see the thing with that though is like we were discussing is the damage resistance is pretty huge, and then when you go the totemic bear path, you're going to have resistance to everything but psychic. All right, so you could further compensate for like one of the biggest weaknesses of a melee character, and that's being kited by ranged attacks and
Well, the barbarian
dip
also
into
gets the barbaric speed feature, which will,
absolutely, but the minimum range on a longbow is 150. It's not at all impossible to kite someone. It's completely reasonable to keep that distance. So while that's going to prove troublesome for the melee character, so being able to shut down the range damage and just make that not a viable option for someone trying to do that and force them to close the distance is a fantastic deterrent to being kited. Again, just one of the Achilles heels of melee characters. And on top of that, you could hurl the ammunition back at them potentially. It just further adds salt to the wound. And then, you also get all the sweet key powers as well. Flurry of blows and extra movement, et cetera, that key powers offer as well. So, I mean, I think that's definitely, something to consider as another option uh, for, damage mitigation. And to me, playing a lot of melee characters and having to deal with being peppered from range would definitely be something I would consider strongly, to help make that bother me less. What are your thoughts on that? Oh, I see. BRB. All right, all right. So what do you folks think? This got you thinking on some stuff. Anybody out there considering making a tank or just a damage sponge? Drop some comments for sure and give us your ideas as well. While
all
we
right.
go into more depth about some other things we're considering. Did you catch that?
I missed the last bit. I had to step away from my computer for a quick second. Sorry for the interruption.
No, basically I was saying if the last little bit was being someone who plays a lot of melee-orientated characters, one of the biggest thorns in my side is ranged attacks. And, I think going the monk route is a completely viable option with the deflect missiles ability that you can just basically do. It just costs a reaction when you're shot at to shut down range damage while you close the distance.
Which is something else that bothers me when I'm playing certain games, especially tabletop games,
Mm-hmm.
where like when I play a tabletop game or when I run a tabletop game, I use models and full 3D terrain.
Absolutely.
So one thing that I've noticed, which most players don't seem to take advantage of, is cover.
Yes.
Covering, moving through cover is not only viable but should be default way of thinking.
From a from
Always,
a from a tactical standpoint, it should be used and abused.
yeah, which is an entirely different and lengthy discussion to say
Oh
the
yeah.
least. But as far as damage mitigation, just pure damage mitigation based on your character class or character build,
Hmm.
what would you think about now these two characters are at two different completely different polar ends of the spectrum when it
Okay.
comes to fighting, but a barbarian and a rogue.
You see that that's actually 100% legit. A rogue is by far my favorite class to play. I've been playing it since 3.5, many games as a rogue. And while you gotta approach that from a different angle, where when you're playing as a rogue, I feel it goes more from the realm of damage soak to avoidance. And playing as a 5e rogue, you can at level 2 with the I believe it's the uncanny action. You can take the dodge action as a bonus action, and what that's going to do is everybody who attacks you has disadvantage, so they have
Well,
to attack you twice and
with
take the lowest roll. On
with the
top of
canny action, coupled with the barbarian's reckless attack, you can effectively gain advantage on your targets that you're attacking while not giving advantage on targets attacking you though.
yes,
And still
absolutely.
have the barbarian's damage resistance during his rage.
See, I think that would be the biggest asset personally is while raging and taking getting that extra damage resistance, but being a rogue and forcing them to roll twice and take the lowest result on top of cutting damage in half. Uh, you should almost always be the last person standing. Absolutely.
Not only that, but rogues also get the uncanny dodge ability at 5th level, which means this is what it states right here. Starting at 5th level, when an attacker that you can see hits you with an attack, you can use your reaction to halve the attack's damage.
Oh,
That is
absolutely.
that is independent of damage resistance.
Oh, absolutely.
So effectively, if you're getting hit, you can quarter the resistance you're getting, only taking 25% of the initial hit if you still
Yes.
manage to get hit.
So as soon as you get hit, you can use that to have the damage, and then once it I guess strikes you, whatever way you want to look at the stack, an MTG term if anybody's familiar with it, and then apply your natural barbarian resistance on top of that. So
Yeah.
that would be huge, absolutely huge in soaking damage. And then if you could take that a step further and go 3 levels in barb to get your totemic bear path. Take rogue 5 levels. Is it 5 levels in rogue to get that what was it called? The uncanny.
Uncanny dodge.
Get the uncanny dodge, and then dip into warrior or something just for the heavy armor proficiency. Of course, you'd want to start warrior to get it. If you dip, you don't get the heavy armor proficiency off the rip. So you could use heavy armor master to potentially ignore another 3
Well,
damage on top of
that
that.
that would be that would sort of counteract the unarmored defense you would get as a barbarian, though.
I would see. I'm not talking about unarmored defense. I'm not talking about AC. I'm just talking about raw damage. So just having a jacked AC and not getting hit to me is completely different tanking method as opposed to actually absorbing the hits.
But
The
here's
way the
here's
way I see it is if your AC is 30, that's fantastic. That's absolutely amazing. You won't get hit that much. But when you do get hit, you're going to fucking feel it. As opposed to, going, something like what I just described, where even if you do get hit, it's a flesh wound at best. Being able to just slug off all that damage, you can deal with having a 14 AC or something like that. Who cares when you're ignoring 3/4 of everything they throw at you?
Not everything one attack, because
Well,
it costs a reaction to use the uncanny dodge.
well,
Three
see,
quarters of one attack.
See, even if that's the case, that's gonna come down to just being smart about how you use it, because you're gonna get the natural, constant resistance as a barbarian. That's on all the time while you're raging, and then you're just going to be smart about using that. And yeah, you can use it, once every turn. So, let's say this dragon comes in and hits you for 100 points of damage. You're probably going to want to use it then, and you're taking 25 points of damage and just otherwise laughing at this guy. I don't, you know what I'm saying? Like, who cares? Hit me all you want, because I'm just going to shrug that shit off. It's definitely more useful, in my opinion. Something like that too would be in like a single, like big quote unquote boss fight. That uncanny dodge won't be as useful in big melees.
Yeah, a big getting surrounded by lesser sort of minions and having to deal with multiple attacks. However, there's one thing I want to point out. This little show or segment is called Rules as Written, so we should be getting the rules right. And I sort of overlooked the rage. I was double checking rage, and the bonuses you get while you're raging only apply while not wearing heavy armor. So you would be unable to combine a barbarian's rage and heavy armor master.
Oh, wow. I could have swore I read that. I must have overlooked that. Well, there you go, folks. Ignore everything I just said previously about the fighter, barbarian, heavy armor, rage combo. It is
Well,
useless.
the fighter is still viable.
Yes, for all
the action surge, and you get
all
the
the
ability
feats.
to take second wind.
Second wind. Yeah. See, second wind is something that's going to rely, though, on having large amounts of fighter levels to matter. Early on, the heal's fine. Later on, we can start getting into higher levels unless you're focusing on fighter. And even focusing on fighter, that heal is negligible at best.
You might think it's negligible, but let's say instead of going human, you decide to take half orc. Half orcs. Let me turn to half orc and get what it's called. But basically, half orc, when being dropped to 0.
Right.
All right. Not every time. I'll double check.
I believe it's
called
once per
relentless.
encounter.
Yeah, relentless endurance. When you are reduced to 0 hit points but not killed outright, you can drop to 1 hit point instead. You can't use this feature again until you finish a long rest. Yes. So, in between long rests, as a half-orc, if you are dropped down, you can instead go to 1 hit point and take your second wind. Mm-hmm. That's more than just negligible. That will save your character's life. That'll save your character.
Possibly, because if you look at the numbers with second wind, I believe it is 1d10 plus your fighter level. So you're capping out at level 20 on a max d10 roll at 30 hit points. 30 hit points. That's nothing. At level 20, that's nothing. I mean, it's definitely something
to disengage and run.
Yes, I'm not saying it's useless, but I'm saying if you have a competent cleric, or any other healer in your party, the odds of you using that is never. You'll probably forget you have it, honestly.
Well, in the defense of what we're talking about, having a competent party, each playing their own specific role to the absolute best of their abilities, there's really no need to have to worry about mitigating that much damage.
Well, there is. There absolutely is. And the reason behind that is it's your job as the tank to soak up damage. But you have to take into consideration, and any MMO gamer could validate this claim right here. It is the tank's job as well to take care of themselves and to help relieve a load off of the cleric. If you're just taking absolutely every point of damage point for point, the cleric is going to have no choice but to blow every heal he's got on you, and that leaves nothing else for the party. Whereas if you're able to as a barbarian, to slug off half that damage, go rogue and potentially reduce even more of a big hit, it takes a load off the cleric or just the healer in general's shoulder. It's going to allow him to pay some attention to the rest of the party. I'm sure, you being in there face checking everything, and having to take all the heals for yourself, the party's not going to like that. As a healer, I wouldn't like that. It's like, hey man, like our main DPS over here is getting taken to Pound Town. I'm sure he needs some love. But you're in there, also soaking up a lot of damage as well. So it's like, what do I do, Whereas if you're able to help the cleric and ignore some of that damage so he can reasonably ignore and not heal you for a few turns and shed some love to the other party, that's detrimental. That's absolutely important.
That's when it comes into play where you have to be more than just a damage sponge.
No, you will be dealing out your own deeps, absolutely. But, I mean, that's not going to be your primary role. The whole purpose of having you there is to help keep some damage off of the rest of the party. I mean, it's going to be almost impossible if a monster is played well. Of course, it's all going to come down to the DM. If the monster, they kind of get in the mindset of the monster and play it as, that creature from a tactical standpoint. You're not going to be able to, soak every hit, but you're going to be able to do your fair share, so it helps keep the rest of the party safe. And again, you're going to be doing some damage as well, but being able to mitigate some of the damage you take, so when the monster does inevitably crack the rogue or the ranger or whatever soft-jawed DPS you might have, the rogue's going to be, or the cleric or the healer or whatever is going to be able to afford to not, spend his heals on them and not worry about you as much.
Well, that's why I like the idea of going barbarian druid.
Here's another thing, another form, I guess you could say, of damage mitigation is to be like a self-sustainable like healer, like paladin, and then you could even, mix it with cleric. I know that seems kind of redundant, but the idea behind that will basically just be to give you access to more heals. So if you didn't want to go barbarian, you could do paladin cleric, and again, there's a method to the madness, and that's to get access to all the heals. You have all the heals. So as you're getting blasted with damage, you can heal yourself. But that's something you'd want to definitely, like, if you have that idea in mind, you want to tell your party ahead of time as well, so they're not whining as you're blowing all the heals on yourself. Like, just look, guys. This is so I can stay alive and soak the damage. You're still going to need a dedicated party healer, because my lay on hands, my mass heal, everything that can just be focused directly on me is going to be so I can take more hits for you guys.
I think a better synergy would be, instead of just straight paladin cleric, would be to use druid and cleric, because both their spells, they both get a lot of spells.
Right.
They're both keyed off of wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
The druid can wild shape in between short rests. It recharges between short rests, and while a druid of the moon is wild shaped, he can use those spell slots to heal himself as bonus action. So he doesn't need to stop pressing the attack. He can
Right.
continue to press the attack in wild shape, heal himself in wild shape, and not worry about having to take actual hit point damage from his character sheet until he's knocked out of that wild shape. Not to
Right.
mention the ability to change into a various different forms of wild shapes, which, as we discussed earlier, gives a lot of variety and different methods and means
Tons,
to attack
yeah, tons of
situations
utility.
other than combat. Like, if you're a heal monkey and you're that kind of heal monkey, a self-sustaining tank,
Right.
you could do some crazy stuff like use one of your wild shapes. Say if you were to get trapped and locked in jail somehow, stripped of all your equipment, everything, you could wild shape into a cockroach and escape, or a mouse and escape through the bars.
Now, here's a question
You know,
regarding the druid.
yeah,
Admittedly, I haven't read up on it as much as I have, or I should have. Focusing on some other classes right now, trying to familiarize myself with them. What is the limitation? Going Druid of the Moon and having all these wild shapes. What is the limitation to the wild shapes you can take? And the reason I ask this is because is there a form that the druid can take that has natural resistance or HP regen?
there is. Now I haven't looked into the elemental forms as much as I probably should have,
Right.
but let's start from the bottom and work our way up as far as the druid.
Okay.
The biggest limitation to a druid's form is it has to be a beast, and it has to be a beast that the druid has observed. Now, it's always easy to roleplay that you've seen certain numbers of beasts depending on your background. The biggest problem is that a druid of the moon can become incredibly powerful because eventually they get the ability to wild shape out of the next limitation, which is the beast's challenge rating. For a druid of any other type of druid, the strongest creature that they can wild shape into would be a CR1. But a druid of the moon, say at 10th level, can become their CR divided by 3.
Mm-hmm.
So they can become CR3 monsters, and at level 20, they can become CR6 creatures, beasts. And I don't see a lot of beasts that fill that area. That creates like, a niche amount of like selections, like a small select group of animals that you'd have to constantly resort to.
So I'm
But that's
looking at some stuff right
yeah,
now as far as the wild shapes go, referencing some material on the internet, a list of stuff I guess they can turn it into. And according to this, one of the things that they can do is a CR6, a mammoth,
yeah.
uh, which has an impressive +10 to hit. And then you got the elementals as well, and that can go all the way down to CR6. So
That's once you that's
you
once
can
you
get
hit level
an,
10.
an
You
earth
can,
elemental. Yeah, an earth elemental. It says here, 126 hit points, 17 AC. And they hit like a tank as well.
but it also takes both your wild shapes to transform into an elemental.
Um, yeah, but I mean, if you're going druid, it's it's just one of those things that you gotta, as the player, decide if it's worth it. Is
Yeah.
this going to be the encounter of all encounters for the session, or what's going on with that? So I
Yeah,
mean,
but
you definitely got to make that choice.
if you're multi-classing as a druid, um, it limits you. It's like you said, it's down to that choice of that moment. Do you think that you're gonna need something, that big in this battle, and also in accordance with like constant battles, getting up to the point where you might need it, you're forced to be a little bit more reserved with your wild shape and rely on your spell casting abilities if you multi-class into a druid
Oh,
cleric. Oh,
gargoyle. By the way, gargoyle. Yeah, you can.
no, I think
You
well, what's my monster manual? I think a gargoyle is not a beast.
um, according to this.
It should be right underneath the name.
Okay, my bad. I misread this. I guess you can summon a gargoyle. That's something completely different. Yeah, I'm definitely going to go through and look more into some of the shapes they can take because
Okay, a
if
gargoyle
they
is
can
an
summon,
elemental.
yeah, that's
There
what I'm
we go.
saying. It's an elemental, and you
Yeah,
said I
but
believe
at
later on
level
they can turn into an elemental.
at level 10, a gargoyle is only a CR2 elemental.
It's the resistances that we're looking at here that gargoyles have for tanking.
Yeah, but if we go to elemental and look at the earth elemental,
Do they have resistances?
earth elementals, yeah, they're the tanks as far as elementals are concerned.
Right, I understand that, but I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head. I can't say with utmost certainty that they have resistances.
I'm just turning through my book right now.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Let's see. And for some reason, I was turning in the wrong direction. Dragon section is huge. But yeah, some good synergy as far as like self-sufficiency. Instead of going cleric druid, you might want to go monk druid instead.
Right.
Because like you said, you get the deflect arrows, you get the synergy of unarmored AC.
Right. It says right here, by the way, nope, without me to interrupt, the Earth Elemental has resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-magical weapons. And you can also do any elemental. So Air Elemental has Air Elemental damage resistance to lightning, thunder, bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing, which honestly seems more viable as far as just flat resistances go than the Earth Elemental over damage mitigation. Fire is bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing, and immunities to fire and poison. Condition immunities is exhaustion, grappled, paralyzed, petrified, poisoned, prone, restrained, and unconscious. You can't be knocked out. And then the water elemental damage resistance is acid, bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-magical weapons. Immunities is poison, and also condition immunities, exhaustion, grappled, paralyzed, petrified, poisoned, prone, restrained, and unconscious. And because I forgot to mention with the earth and air, they have damage immunities. The earth is poison, and then exhaustion, paralyzed, petrified, poison, and unconscious. And the air is exhaustion, grappled, paralyzed, petrified, poison, prone, restrained, unconscious. But the earth elemental does have vulnerability to thunder, and I believe that is the only elemental, surprisingly, that has a vulnerability. You know, you think fire would be vulnerable to water, vice versa. So yeah, just to reiterate on what you were saying earlier about wild shapes and stuff, the elementals, as far as tanking, would definitely be taking those shapes would be the way to go with just a massive amount of immunities and resistances that they have.
You would just have to wait till later on in the game to do all that.
But at what level could you do this though as a druid? When do you get the option to even do this? That's another thing to take into consideration as well, as far as tanking goes.
Well,
How
if you're
early
going
can you start
straight
soaking?
druid, you would have to go straight druid and just hoof it to level 10 right off the bat.
Ooh, yeah.
You're not going to get a barbarian. You get the ability to rage level 1. Here with the
Right.
druid, as far as taking elemental forms. But this is the thing. Once you hit level 10, you get all that damage resistance to that elemental form. If you're not taking thunder damage as a level 10 druid, then or dealing with magical weapons, that 126 HP effectively becomes, 252 effectively, since you're
Right.
resisting that damage. Not to mention the hit points you have in your druid form and the ability to burn spell slots to heal your elemental form during combat.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely a druid is definitely a viable option for a tank in the game with the wild shapes. Certainly, and especially once they get the ability to become elementals. Something else to consider, I believe, if your game goes on long enough, at level 20, you can become an arch druid,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no limit to your wild shape. You can just be an elemental all day, every day at level 20.
Yeah, you can one round be an earth elemental, next round turn into a fire elemental, third round go to an air or water elemental, and so on and so forth. And as long as you don't take enough damage in that one round to drop that elemental, you're effectively immortal.
Oh yeah. The thing is, though, too, is like once you start talking about, getting into some crazy, stuff like that, I could just become an elemental at will. You're also going to be fighting stuff
Yeah.
that could feasibly beat its ass. So before everybody's like level 20 druid's the ultimate tank. Take into consideration that you'll probably be fighting CR 15, 20, 23 monsters on top of that. So you're not going to be unkillable, but you'll definitely be tougher than the average druid.
Like I said, it depends. It all depends on whether or not what you're fighting, what you're coming up against, can deal enough damage to drop you out of your wild shape in one round.
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
and also at that level, you're going to be taking a lot of magical damage. I mean, that
Oh, of course.
if you're not taking magical weapons, it's going to be coming from spells and damage other than what you have resistance to.
Of course. Of course. You know,
So, like, let's see, not a black dragon, but an ancient blue dragon, right? If you take an earth elemental form, right?
and they do thunder damage, right?
That's why I chose them. I think they do thunder damage. Oh, lightning breath. Sorry, but let's just say lightning breath, right? It's a DC 23 dexterity saving throw, doing 88 damage.
And then say the earth elemental, has vulnerability to thunder damage. We'll just say it's thunder damage theory crafting. So that's going to be double.
Yeah. See, look at this. It has multi-attack. It can do 3 attacks. Let's see, 2 claws and a bite, right? So it's averaging 20 in a bite and 16 in a claw. So that's 16, 32, 52 points of damage, right? And then with its legendary actions, it can either do a wing attack or a tail attack, and a tail attack is an additional 18. So that kind of druid has the potential of possibly 1v1ing an ancient dragon.
Possibly.
Possibly. Except
that's
if the dragon breathes lightning on it, then it's the same as everyone else. You make your DC 23 dex save or take 88 points of lightning damage.
Right. See, honestly, I think almost any class can be a viable tank to some degree. But of course, other classes and builds are going to excel at it more than others. Like, you could be a straight rogue and tank. And, it's just, a matter of how you look at it, too.
You won't be able to tank necessarily effectively, but if you want to talk about a straight rogue tank,
you won't be able to take raw damage, most likely, but you figure you take the dodge action
Damage avoidance in opposition to damage mitigation.
Absolutely, which is a completely different thing entirely.
Speaking of rogues, Brack Orin mentioned an assassin rogue build, that is, dipping into the shadows, coming back out once they reach a high enough level. If you can combine that with either a Way of the Shadows monk or a warlock, warlocks at 5th level can take an invocation called One with the Shadow.
Right.
So in dim lighting or darkness, they don't need to hide. They can actually become invisible at will.
Okay.
That's at a 5th level warlock. If you go Way of the Shadows rogue, that is much higher. I mean, not rogue. Way of the Shadows monk. Way of the Shadows monk is sort of 5th edition's answer to a character becoming a shadow dancer. If you give me a minute to pull up the Way of the Shadows monk, is yes, at 11th level you get Cloak of Shadows.
That lets you teleport.
No. That's at 6th level. It's called Shadow Step.
Okay.
At Shadow Step, you can teleport between shadows, areas of dim or darker lighting. That's also at will too. And then you then have advantage on the first melee attack you make before the end of the turn while teleporting.
Mm-hmm.
So for a rogue, multi-classing into a rogue, you teleport behind an enemy as a bonus action. You can do the teleport as a bonus action. So you can teleport as your bonus action, then take your move to go in and attack. Get your sneak attacks. Maybe even the assassination.
Well, the thing with the assassin style of rogue is the only benefit that you really get early level by going that path is that 3rd level when you have advantage when you attack an enemy. You have advantage when you attack creatures that haven't taken a turn in combat yet. Okay, cool. That's all well and good. The assassination aspect of the assassin's path, you don't even get until 17th level. So in order to, you have to have 5 levels in Warlock to do the Become Invisible. So that's not even viable to merge with this at this point. The monk, Way of the Shadows monk, you got to get 6th level to do the.
That's the teleport to get 6th level. To meld with the shadows, you have to go 11 levels in there.
So that's not even viable because you get Death Strike at level 17, and when you attack and hit a creature that is surprised, it has to make a Constitution saving throw, DC 8 plus Dex plus proficiency, and on a failed save,
that's
double
not the
damage.
Assassination. That's the Death Strike.
Right. The assassinate just gives you advantage when you're attacked against the target, and if you're playing.
And during the surprise round, if your enemy is surprised, you get an auto crit. And in 5th edition, sneak attack dice are multiplied when you get a crit.
Yes, but the assassin path of the rogue archetypes, the assassin path, the auto crit on a surprised opponent that's just a standard game mechanic. The only benefit you get at level 3 from the assassin path when you initially take it is you have advantage on attack rolls against any creature that hasn't taken a turn in combat yet. If you're playing a rogue right in the first place, you should be looking for every single opportunity to hide to get your sneak attack or advantage on your attacks regardless. In my opinion, the assassin path is by far the worst path to take as a rogue. Absolutely worst. One of the best is probably, in my opinion, is absolutely you get all the illusion and trickery to go with your stealth mechanic to make it even harder to pin down, be detected, and give you more opportunities, especially if you get in, character and in the game and role play it, to get advantage as a rogue. That's really all you need. I mean, I'm not hanging out 17 levels to just effectively double my damage. Fuck that. I will just play a rogue properly and just sneak attack, every single freaking turn that I can. If you were going to mix like a rogue with anything, it would probably go something along the lines of like a barbarian or a fighter or a ranger. To
Why
get
not one of the spellcasting classes, or a warlock,
because
or a
you
bard?
can, you can already take the arcane trickster archetype,
Hmm.
which will give you access to spells. Respectively, it's not as many spells as a standard caster, but as a rogue, the whole purpose, in my opinion, and some people's opinions may vary, and you're probably wrong, is to use the spells like the illusion spells, mirror image, minor illusion, major illusion, to further confound your enemies. You're not going to be, as a rogue, trying to throw fireballs and lightning bolts, because you're going to completely gimp your own damage by not applying your sneak attack dice every time that you attack an enemy. And the conditions are right. If there's an opponent, if you have someone within 5 feet of your enemy, you get to apply sneak attack dice. At level 5, that's an extra 3d6 every time, once a turn. Once a turn, you hit someone, you get to put an extra 3d6 on top of them if there's someone right next to them. If you have the surprise on them, you also get to do that, and it's a crit. One of the reasons that I would probably dip into a legitimate spellcaster is only for a spell like a hold person or a paralysis spell or something, because when you hit an enemy with something like that, every attack's a critical hit. If they're under basically an effect of like a paralysis, every hit's a
Well,
critical hit.
like I was saying, why not dip into both, multi-classing both a rogue and a warlock? Because a warlock is, it's not necessarily a legitimate caster when put up against the others. Very limited spell casting as far as their actual spells. A very limited selection of spells, but they get the invocations,
Mm-hmm.
and whenever they do cast a spell, they cast it at the highest level they can cast, and they regenerate those spell slots during a short rest, when everyone else basically has to do a long rest. And you also get some nice things like what I was saying before with one with the shadows. As long as you're in dim light or darkness, you take an action to become invisible. That has to be something that's invaluable for a rogue. You also you can get the armor of shadows, which basically gives you mage armor. So you don't have any armors on at all. You can walk around with no armor and no weapons and get Pact of the Blade. And from a roleplay standpoint, you are a very unassuming enemy. You have no magical vestments, no spell books, no armor or weapons, but almost at the drop of the hat, you could become a very deadly opponent. You could manifest your rapier or dagger or short sword or whatever finessable weapon you find that you enjoy. Get your sneak attacks. Give yourself some armor to up your survivability. And you have a whole slew of other invocations you can take, like like oh, the pacts, Pact of the Great Old One. You can reach into someone's. Basically, you have an at-will message spell.
Right.
So you can communicate with allies in complete silence. There's no moving of the hands to cast a spell. There's no verbalizations to give away your own position.
Mm-hmm.
You can step into a shadow, choose to go invisible, and just communicate with an ally. To communicate that you need your ally to draw the enemy towards this shadow so that you could, pop them with your sneak attacks.
Hmm.
Also you can get some hold person, hold monster spells via invocations. You can get Evert's Black Tentacles for like hold that back and use it as an escape method.
Right.
A lot of other things. Like you can get Ascendant Step, which is levitate but at will. So when you
Hmm.
need to get to any position vertically on a battlefield or infiltrate an area, you have that. You
Right.
can get Eldritch Sight, Devil Sight, the ability to see in complete darkness, whether it's normal or magical, is crazy for a rogue.
It's definitely very useful.
If you do something like, all right, check this. If you go a tiefling
Right.
and do rogue warlock, eventually the tiefling gains the ability to cast darkness.
Hmm.
You can cast darkness and have and see through that magical darkness, and just
Hmm.
all day long, get free sneak attacks. Who's gonna stop you?
I I completely agree there. Uh, One thing I'd like to say though, back to the damage mitigation part of our discussion, because I'm sure we could both carry on all day about getting sidetracked with topics. At the end of the day, as far as damage mitigation goes, I think the absolute best way to have damage mitigation is to buy your DM GM dinner and schmooze them up a little bit and say, hey, you think I could get this armor of invulnerability? It's in the book where it gives you natural resistances, and you can turn on this power where once a day for 10 minutes, which is should be more than enough time for any combat, you are completely immune to all damage. You are invulnerable. Like just slap that on your tank and tell him happy birthday. We all chipped in for this. Cleric won't be healing you anymore, so just accept it.
All right, well, you heard it there, ladies and gentlemen. The best way to become the biggest, baddest ass damage sponge and have an immortal character is to buy your DM dinner. With that said, I think we'll end our discussion on gaming in the raw and keep maybe rogue talk for a further episode. I hope you
Absolutely.
I hope you enjoyed. If you have any more sort of comments, ideas, or suggestions on building the ultimate damage sponge, you could message myself or even Bruce on Facebook, and maybe we'll pick up discussion again at a later time.
Absolutely. What can we look forward to possibly next time, Infinite Roleplay?
I'm thinking since we got a little bit carried away with the rogue discussion, maybe going and speaking about the rogues. Also, I want to see if I can get Brack Oren to come off on here because that seemed to be a discussion he enjoyed. He already started talking to me on Facebook before he had to step away from his computer.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I would love to weigh in on the Rogue for sure. It's been my favorite class since forever, and we can go over that. Maybe touch base on good multi-class options and stuff for it. I think that'd be fantastic.
All right, wonderful. So that's going to be the end of our discussion. I hope everyone out there watching has a nice day. I'm Nelson. This has been Infinite Roleplay. My guest Bruce. You can also catch him on YouTube. And all I have left to say is peace.